Welcome back to another edition of Coffee with Cathy. Today's segments are going to be about one particular piece of legislation that is pending again this year. It's called Erin's Law. It is a bill to teach children about safe touches and not safe touches, and safe secrets and not safe secrets. This bill came to my attention from a young woman out of Illinois. Her name is Erin, thus the name Erin's Law. She was sexually abused by a neighbor and a family member, and has made it her personal commitment to go around the country and have this law enacted in every state, and then she wants to take it international. Sexual abuse is not just a national problem, it is also an international problem. Erin had it passed in 12 states so far, and it is pending in another 24 states this year, and is here in Connecticut. And actually, I would like to show you a small clip with Erin and I when she came to do a press conference and was honored down in Monroe at the Jane Doe No More benefit for people who are sexually abused.
So what's the importance behind this bill? Well, this will empower kids to speak up and tell if they are being sexually abused. The same way we teach kids in school, stranger danger, don't go look for the lost puppy. We teach kids bully intervention. If someone's picking on you at the school bus or at recess, speak up and tell an adult. Oh, and then we do tornado drills, bus drills, fire drills. How about the 8 ways to say no to drugs through DARE? We give kids all this important education, but the one message we fail to teach kids is how to speak up and tell if they're being abused. As a young kid from 6 to 8, I was being abused by that neighbor. From 11 to 13, I was being sexually abused by that family member. The only message I got as a child was, this is our little secret. No one will believe you. If you tell anybody, I'll come get you. Well, my goal is to give kids that voice I didn't have as a child, so that we can put these perpetrators out of business and empower kids to speak up and tell. With the statistics, 93% of the time, children know their perpetrator. So, stranger danger program we use throughout this nation is only protecting 7% of the population. So I hope the people of Connecticut will see the importance behind this bill, will write their legislators and ask them to support this bill, because honestly, I think the only ones that should be against this bill are the sex offenders themselves. I hope we can make Connecticut the 12th or 13th state this year to pass this bill.
I have with me Jillian Gilchrist, and Jillian works for CONNSACS, Connecticut Sexual Assault Crisis Center, and she was instrumental in helping out last year and again this year to work on this piece of legislation. Hi, Jillian. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. We have this piece of legislation this year. What do you think of Erin's Law?
I think Erin's Law is incredibly important. Child sexual abuse impacts numerous children, 1 in 6 girls, 1 in 8 boys. And the dynamics make it so that it's not only a physical violation, but it's an abuse of power, trust, and authority. And so ensuring that children have tools to be able to speak up and speak out about sexual abuse is vitally important.
And we already teach stranger danger in schools, but the facts are that children aren't normally abused by strangers. It's important to teach stranger danger, of course, but it's actually over 90% of sexual abuses happen by a person that is known to the child, whether it's a neighbor or a member of their family, or a teacher or a coach. Do you have an opinion on that piece of the law?
Yes, exactly. So child sexual abuse, like you said, 90%. And so when we teach children the stranger danger, again, that's important too, but it gives a picture both to children and to adults that child sexual abuse is going to be perpetrated by someone kind of lurking around the street corner, when in fact it's someone trusted and known to the child. And so we need to be able to not only teach children the good touch, bad touch, that they have private areas that they can protect, but also to really empower children, because the dynamics make it so that a child, it's very hard for a child to say that someone that they love and care about is sexually abusing them. It's very confusing to a child. Additionally, like Erin spoke to, sometimes the adults actually tell the child straight out, you can tell no one, and I might hurt you or your family members. And so for a child, that's very confusing. And so being able to ensure that children at least have learned something about the ways that they might be able to protect themselves or speak up is so important.
And we really don't want children to blame themselves, because often they blame themselves, and truly it should be the perpetrator that takes the full consequences of their action. And that is something that is what happens with young boys and young girls who are sexually abused. They often think it's something they did wrong. They wore the wrong clothes. They were acted inappropriate. They really take on that ownership of a problem that is not theirs. And I apologize, but today I went to the dentist and I'm talking a little bit weird today. So,
but yes, it is never a child, an adult survivor. It's never a victim's fault for being sexually assaulted. It's always the offender's, and we need to ensure that responsibility is put on them. What's important about this bill this year is that it also includes pieces in it to engage not only teachers and the Board of Ed, but to engage parents in the conversation. Because again, it really should be an entire community-wide effort to prevent child sexual abuse. If, God forbid, child sexual abuse happens, which we know unfortunately it will, then we need to ensure that children can have some tools to get the supports that they need.
I met a young girl when I worked in the Department of Correction, and she was a young woman. She was in her early 20s, and she came to me and said, we were involved in what it was called Project RAP, and it was sort of like Scared Straight without yelling, just to let people know that they had choices on whether or not to act out or to deal with their issues. And she came to me one day and she said, I didn't know, she said, that it was wrong for me to be abused. And until I started taking part in this program, I thought it was normal for children to be sexually, to be involved with sex with family members. I didn't know that I could say no. And I didn't know that I could speak out. And she said, last night I called home and I told my family who's watching my young daughter that not to let her near my cousin. And I thought that was really powerful, and it let me know then that we had to do more to allow children the ability to know that they didn't have to put up with abuse, that they could speak out, that somebody would be there for them. And we've come a long way on sexual abuse. We're starting to deal with issues right away and dealing with issues as they come forth. We've done some legislation last year on human trafficking. We've done some legislation on sexual assaults in colleges, and we're dealing with that issue. And this is another piece to the puzzle. And I think that it provides an additional tool for teachers and boards of ed and parents to find a way to understand what's going on with their children when this may or may not, hopefully this never happens to them, but we all know that it does happen way too often.
And CONNSACS is so pleased for you and for Erin for bringing this bill forward. Our member programs, we have 9 sexual assault crisis programs throughout the state. In your area of the state, it's the Sexual Assault Crisis Center of Eastern Connecticut, who's been doing work in schools for some time now, but it's never been required. And so there can be a pushback sometimes. Sometimes administrations don't understand what we're talking about, that this would be age appropriate sexual abuse awareness education. And so we are just so pleased that this might give a bigger way for more children to get this important information.
And I think it should be stated really clearly, this is not about sex education. This is about safe touch and not safe touch, and what the differences are, and that safe secret and not safe secret, so that kids know that there are some things that should never be kept secret, and there are certain parts of their body that should never be touched by anyone unless they give permission, and they can't keep it to themselves, and children need to have that ability. And it does hold an opt-out clause that allows parents to remove their children should they so choose. So, gives the parents the ultimate ability to opt their children out. But it provides the education for those specific things that fit very clearly in with stranger danger, that there are safe touches and not safe touches, and that there are safe secrets and not safe secrets. And I'm really pleased that you're helping us with this piece of legislation and working on it, because you and your organization do such great work around Connecticut to help victims of sexual assault, and it's very, very important.
Yes, so in addition to the prevention education and awareness education that CONNSACS member programs do, we also provide the direct service for women, men, and children. And myself, I started off my career as a child advocate at the Sexual Assault Crisis Center of Eastern Connecticut and saw over 400 children. And so based on the children I saw, the majority were always known. They always knew their offender. And so it really does add a dynamic to that coming forward, because for some children, it just is part of their family.
Correct.
And so we really do need to educate that, no, that's not okay, regardless of who's doing it.
Correct. And, you know, I think that the numbers clearly show we've seen a lot more people get arrested and convicted. For a long time, offenders were not arrested and were not convicted. Years ago, I worked on Megan's Law as a regular citizen after a family member had been assaulted, and we were able to get that through, and we were able to get the sex offender registry up and running. And now it's time for us to provide this education. We're at that point where we can do this step. And I think that providing people the tools that they need, you know, I was working with the city of Norwich. We're talking about the number of sex offenders that they were in Norwich, and I think that it's not that that the numbers have increased, but what I think has happened with the legislation that has been passed, we're doing a much better job of identifying, arresting, and ultimately convicting perpetrators of sexual assault.
And now if we can ensure that, God forbid again, if this happens, that a child can get the services and the supports that they need, then hopefully we can prevent many of the long-term consequences of this abuse.
Correct, because it is clear that people who are sexually abused have long-term consequences of drug addiction, alcohol abuse. They often harm themselves, and they feel worthless, and then have the ultimate consequences of depression and other consequences. And it would be really good if we didn't have to deal with those long-term consequences.
Exactly. And so another avenue for, you know, children, families right now, if anyone listening has been sexually abused, they certainly could reach out to the Sexual Assault Crisis Center in their area.
And what else are you working on this session?
So we're working on the campus bill, which is very exciting. This would ensure that this would actually make Connecticut at the forefront of policy in the nation on campuses. It would bring more prevention education and awareness to college campuses, and it would really improve the response to victims on campus.
I think that that's great, and I also know that a piece of that is to teach young men that it's okay to tell their friends that how they're acting is inappropriate. And I really like seeing men actually speak up against sexual assault and sexual violence on women in particular, anywhere, but in particular on campuses. Our young people go away, it's their first time away from home. We want that to be a positive experience so that they can move on. So I'm really glad that you're working on that bill. I thought that that was something super important to come out.
Thank you. It's very exciting. It's a really exciting time. I think for the first time, maybe ever, people are really challenging the culture that exists that supports offending behavior. And if we can get at that and really combat the victim blaming that often takes place, and instead of always looking at the behavior of the survivor, the victim, let's look at the behavior of the offender. And if we can engage both men and women to challenge that, then we'll be so much the better.
I agree. And I think that it's about time we hold the people accountable that should be held accountable, not the people who have been abused, men, women, or children. When I worked in the department, 65% of the women had been involved, had been sexually assaulted pre-adolescence. So it's clear that the consequences of having sexual assault not addressed at a younger age and holding those offenders accountable. And I believe if you got the numbers amongst the male offenders, that you would find out that those numbers are equally as high.
Are equally as high, exactly. Because what's been interesting about the culture work and talking about victim blaming is that then you really see, you know, we have such ideas of masculinity and femininity. So when there is a man that's sexually abused, that takes its toll, because society really does kind of judge them, although they shouldn't, and keeps men quiet as well.
Correct. And I was really glad that we did some work last year on human trafficking. A lot of people think it doesn't happen in Connecticut, but it has happened in Connecticut in quiet communities as well as the larger cities, where young men and young women are taken advantage of and forced into servitude and actually trafficked both in this state and out of the state.
Yes, that really is where you can kind of see the whole power and control come into play with sexual violence, I think in particular with human trafficking, because oftentimes it is lower income young women who really don't have much opportunity, and so someone comes and takes advantage of them and then sells them across state lines. And sadly, we're still in a place where many times it's those young women that are still punished. And so the trafficking laws and the discussion about trafficking is really helping to move us forward so that we look at prostitution and other criminal offenses differently to really say, are these young women at fault or are these actually victims?
Correct. Correct. I always thought it was odd that we would arrest someone for prostitution and they would actually serve time in jail, and yet the person who was buying that person does not serve equal time in jail. That the consequences are not just as clear for them as they are for the women involved in prostitution.
Exactly. We really need to challenge that market that's out there and
Correct.
Make that an offense. Why should you be seeking out oftentimes these young women?
Exactly, and we want these women to have the power to also report the abuse that they're involved in too.
Yes.
No matter their lifestyles, their lifestyle should not be the most important thing that's revealed in a criminal case against someone who abuses them.
And to that point, yeah, that's another area where you really see the victim blaming come into play.
Correct.
A lot of people don't really feel that those women are victims because of the work they do, but in the end, no one should ever be sexually assaulted. It is not your fault if you've been sexually assaulted. And so we really do need that huge culture shift to look and say, why are offenders offending? Another interesting thing that's come out of the campus work is the research of Dr. David Lissack, and he's done some studies on various campuses, and it has showed that the majority of offenders are repeat offenders.
Correct.
And so we know a lot more nowadays about offenders. And so, I think a lot of our assumptions and the myths that people grow up hearing, we're starting to really challenge. And hopefully we're turning a corner.
I think that's great. And so, Erin's Law?
Yes.
So we're going to get it passed this year?
Yes.
And we're going to continue to work on supporting victims and holding perpetrators accountable. And this is Coffee with Cathy, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jillian. I really
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Thank you so much for coming to Connecticut to stress the importance of Erin's Law. We worked on it last year and almost made it.
Well, you're not as bad as New York, where the same woman continues to kill the bill. 3 years in a row now.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's going on the third year.
Holy moly.
She's against school mandates, and so she is chair of the education committee and is not supporting it.
Oh,
So I'm going to have to get the attention of the governor and the speaker.
there we go. Well, thanks for coming. So, what is your opinion, and why do Erin's Law? Why should we do it?
Because it's the importance behind this law is to give kids a voice, to speak up and tell if they're being abused. Because we teach kids in schools tornado drills, bus drills, fire drills, bullying intervention, internet safety, DARE. We teach kids the 8 ways to say no to drugs. Well, where are the 8 ways on how to get away and how to tell today? If a kid's being abused in the home, the only message they're getting is, this is our secret, no one will believe you, I'll come hurt you, they'll be put in foster care if you tell anybody. So these kids have all these behavior problems, it affects them in school, and they don't know how to speak up, and they usually don't until they're an adult, because the only message they're getting is from the perpetrator. And if we can empower them in school, that is the place I feel is the best way to teach kids safe touch, safe secrets, unsafe secrets. Empowering them and also preventing the perpetrators from hurting any more children. Because as we know, perpetrators usually don't have one victim. And 93% of the time, it's someone a child knows and trusts.
So the stranger danger, while a good message, is not reaching the majority of the children that are sexually abused.
Well, stranger danger, we cover it throughout the country. parents, it's the one discussion they talk to their kids about. Well, let's look at the statistics. 93% of the time, children know their perpetrator. So if they're stranger danger, we're protecting 7% of the population. Your kids are safer at the bus stop with a stranger at this dawn than they are in the home at Christmas or the family gathering, birthday party, with the other family members or after school with the coach.
A family member of mine was molested by a family friend.
Once again, you know the person.
I know, and you know the person, and it really made a big impact on the family. And then throughout time, I also worked for the Department of Correction, and I used to take inmates out on what we call Project Wrap, softer version of Scared Straight. And this woman came to me after we had gone out, and she said, you know, I'm 20 years old, and I never knew I could say no. And she said, I called home, and she ended up in prison. You know, she's out now, but she said that knowing that she could now say no and that it was wrong, she called home and said, please don't let my daughter be around my cousin.
Good.
And I thought that was it really showed to me that we had to figure out a way to reach kids when they're younger.
Definitely.
So thanks so much for coming to Connecticut. Let's go fight win. Let's get it done.
Let's make Connecticut the 12th or 13th state.
12th or 13th state. Today's vote on the minimum wage is the second year in a row that we've addressed minimum wage, and we've extended it now to be $10.10 an hour. It's something that I think is a really good thing because it actually helps our lowest paid workers in the state of Connecticut, which primarily happen to be women with children. And this is exactly why I support the minimum wage, because women with children are supporting not just themselves, they're supporting whole families on the minimum wage, and I think that this will actually provide them some more resources in order to meet basic expenses. So I support this minimum wage for that reason, and I'm happy to be a part of a 2-year process to bring us up to $10.10 an hour by 2017. Very excited, and I look forward to the passage of the bill, and I'm truly excited to be a part of it 2 years in a row.